Imagine a CEO so powerful, yet so cold that he had not smiled in 20 long years, until one unexpected moment broke through the silence and changed everything. This is not just a story about business. It is about courage, secrets, and the human heart hidden behind the mask of success. What happens when a single encounter shatters 2 decades of silence? Stay with us to find out. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. For 2 decades, Thomas Walden, a wealthy CEO, carried a reputation that stretched across boardrooms and business headlines. He was the man who never smiled. To employees, he was a legend of discipline, a figure who seemed untouchable, almost mechanical in his seriousness. While others laughed at small jokes during coffee breaks or shared light stories in the cafeteria, Thomas moved through life as if humor did not exist. The office staff often whispered about it. Some said he had forgotten how to laugh. Others believed he was too focused on profit and success to waste energy on emotions. Whatever the truth was, one fact remained clear. Thomas Walden had not shown even the faintest curve of a smile for 20 long years. On a quiet evening when most of the building was empty, a young woman named Lily Evans stayed behind to finish paperwork. She was new, barely in her 2nd week as an assistant. Her desk was stacked with files, but she was not just working. To keep herself awake, she began humming a tune under her breath. She imagined herself on a stage, with nothing but her voice and a little courage. Holding a stapler as if it were a microphone, Lily swayed gently and let the words flow. Her voice filled the nearly silent room. She believed she was alone, free from judgment. The song was playful, lighthearted, and almost silly, but it carried a spark of life that broke through the heavy silence of the office. Behind her, the glass door of the office suite opened quietly. Thomas had returned for a forgotten folder. He stepped into the hallway, his polished shoes echoing softly against the marble floor. He paused at the sight before him. There was Lily, unaware of her audience, singing with the energy of someone who refused to let tiredness steal her spirit. Thomas leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. His usual expression was flat, sharp, and unreadable, but something in Lily's presence disrupted that mask. Her performance was far from perfect, but her courage and innocence were magnetic. She swayed side to side, her oversized jacket sliding down her shoulders, her steps slightly offbeat but full of heart. As he stood there, Thomas felt something unusual. The stiffness in his face softened. The corners of his mouth threatened to curve upward. It was not a full smile, not even close, but it was something. For the first time in 20 years, his lips twitched with the ghost of amusement. Lily spun around suddenly, startled by a faint sound. Her eyes widened in shock as she saw the CEO standing there. The pile of papers in her arms slipped, scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. Her cheeks flushed bright red. "Sir," she stammered, dropping to her knees to gather the papers. "I didn't know anyone was still here." Thomas cleared his throat, straightened his posture, and tried to recover his usual composure. Yet even as he bent to pick up one of the files, the twitch in his mouth lingered. "I came back for a document," he said simply, his voice steady. Lily's hands shook as she scrambled to collect the files. "I'm so sorry. I was just trying to stay awake. It won't happen again." Thomas held out one of the folders to her. For a moment, their eyes met. There was silence between them, but it did not feel cold. It felt suspended, like both of them had noticed something neither could explain. Then, almost as quickly as it came, Thomas forced his features back into their usual firmness. He stood tall, gave a short nod, and turned toward the door. But Lily, still breathless, noticed something different. She whispered softly to herself as he walked away. "That was a smile. I saw it." In the elevator, Thomas stared at his reflection in the mirrored doors. The thought unsettled him. 20 years without the faintest hint of laughter. And now, because of a young assistant singing in an empty office, his face had betrayed him. His hand brushed across his jawline as if to erase the moment, but the truth was undeniable. That evening marked a change. It was not dramatic, not something the world would notice, but inside Thomas, a door had quietly opened. The first almost smile had arrived. The story of Thomas Walden's almost smile had already started to spread quietly across the office. No one said it aloud in front of him, but whispers moved faster than memos. People wondered if the untouchable CEO had truly softened, even for a second. To many, it seemed impossible. Yet those who had caught a glimpse of his expression during recent meetings noticed a faint change. It was as though a small crack had appeared in a wall that had stood for 20 years. Lily Evans, the new assistant, tried to convince herself that she had imagined it. But she could not forget the look on his face when their eyes had met. It was not a full smile, but it was close enough to leave her unsettled. The memory followed her through her tasks. Through every phone call and into every late night, she spent organizing files. One morning, the office was buzzing with the arrival of an important guest. Mr. Hayashi, a partner from overseas, had flown in early for a critical negotiation. His reputation was formidable, and the pressure on Thomas to deliver was high. The staff prepared carefully, ensuring no detail was overlooked. As the meeting time approached, Thomas entered the elevator with two senior executives. The air was heavy, his face set in its usual firm lines. Just before the doors closed, Lily stepped inside carrying a folder of reports. She froze when she realized she had stepped into the same space as the CEO. The elevator began to move, and silence filled the small room. The soft hum of the machinery echoed in the background. Lily focused on the glowing floor numbers, willing the ride to end quickly. She tried to keep her breathing steady, but her nerves betrayed her. She clutched the folder tighter, hoping no page would slip. Thomas glanced briefly in her direction. His expression remained serious, yet there was a flicker of recognition. He remembered the quiet moment in the office, late at night, the unexpected spark of energy she had brought with her presence. He turned back to face the doors, but the air between them felt different. Halfway down, the elevator jolted slightly before resuming its motion. Lily almost dropped her folder. Thomas reached out instinctively, steadying the top of the papers with one hand. His gesture was simple, but the moment carried weight. Their eyes met again, and once more, the atmosphere shifted. The elevator stopped at the conference level. As the doors opened, the executive stepped out quickly, eager to prepare. Thomas remained behind for a brief second. His gaze lingered on Lily, who stood frozen in place. There was no smile this time, but there was something softer in his tone as he said, "Walk with me." They entered the conference room together. Mr. Hayashi was already seated, reviewing notes with his assistants. The meeting began with formal greetings and careful translations. The room was tense, every word measured. Thomas spoke with precision, outlining the company's long-term vision. His reputation for discipline was clear, but there was also a quiet steadiness that gained respect. Throughout the discussion, Lily observed closely. She noticed how Thomas maintained composure even when a technical error with the translation system created confusion. Instead of showing frustration, he remained patient, clarifying each point with calm authority. The subtle change in his presence did not go unnoticed by others in the room. When the meeting concluded, Mr. Colvett, Hayashi stood and shook Thomas's hand firmly. The atmosphere had shifted from tense to respectful. The executives exhaled in relief, and conversations began to spark with cautious optimism. As the room cleared, Thomas turned to Lily. "Your timing was fortunate," he said. "Those reports you carried had the numbers I needed." She nodded quickly, almost tripping over her words. "I'm glad I could help, sir." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than expected. Again, the familiar barrier of formality remained, but behind it, there was a trace of something different, something human. Later that afternoon, staff members gathered near the break room, whispering about the outcome of the meeting. Some insisted that Thomas's tone had been lighter, that his focus had been sharper, yet calmer. Others dismissed it as imagination. But Lily knew better. She had seen the subtle shift, not once, but twice. Alone in his office, Thomas looked out over the city skyline. The reflection in the window showed the same face he had carried for years. Yet he felt the difference within himself. Something had changed. And it had begun in the smallest of moments, inside an elevator, with a young assistant holding a folder too heavy for her arms. This was only the beginning of a story that would test walls built over decades and reveal how even the smallest encounters can echo through a life. The echoes of that elevator ride would not fade. The success of the meeting with Mr. Hayashi brought a rare sense of calm to the company. People whispered that Thomas Walden, the CEO known for his stone face, had handled the talks with unusual patience. A few even dared to say he looked more approachable. But in the world of business, good news never travels alone. When whispers of change rise, so do rumors. For weeks, employees had noticed small differences. Thomas seemed to listen more carefully in meetings. His sharp remarks had softened. He even paused once when someone cracked a joke in the break room, and though he did not laugh, his silence felt less heavy. It was enough for people to wonder what was happening. And in every rumor, one name surfaced again and again: Lily Evans. It started quietly. A message left on a desk, a comment exchanged in the hallway. Some suggested that the new assistant had unusual influence over Thomas. Others claimed she had been hired for reasons beyond her skills. The story spread quickly, fueled by jealousy and curiosity. Before long, the storm of rumors grew larger than the truth. Lily felt the change almost immediately. Colleagues who had been friendly now avoided her. Some gave cold stares when she entered a room. She overheard fragments of conversations that stopped the moment she appeared. The office, once a place of opportunity for her, became a maze of suspicion. One afternoon, an email began circulating. It contained false claims, suggesting that Lily had been the reason Thomas shifted key decisions in the Hayashi negotiations. The message implied favoritism and hinted at a hidden relationship. Though unsigned, it carried the sharp edge of intent. Thomas received the same email. Reading it, he felt a wave of anger, not for himself, but for the young woman now caught in the center of lies. For 2 decades, he had dealt with pressure, criticism, and harsh headlines. But this was different. This targeted someone who had only ever shown loyalty and effort. In her small apartment that evening, Lily sat at her kitchen table, staring at the glowing screen of her phone. Friends sent her messages asking if the rumors were true. Her heart ached at the idea that her reputation, barely established, could collapse so quickly. The next morning, she made a decision. She would step away from the office until the storm passed. She walked into Thomas's office, placed her badge on the desk, and said softly, "I think it's best if I take some time away. I don't want to cause trouble for you or for the company." Thomas studied her face, his own expression unreadable yet heavy with thought. After a pause, he said, "Lily, you have done nothing wrong. This storm was created by others, but I cannot stop you if you feel you must leave." She nodded, her voice trembling. "I'll find my place again, maybe with music, maybe somewhere smaller." With that, she turned and left, her footsteps echoing down the long hallway. Days passed, and the atmosphere inside the company grew tense. Productivity dipped, and even the strongest teams felt the weight of distraction. Thomas decided he could not remain silent. He called a full staff meeting. When the room filled, he stood at the front, tall and steady, and began to speak. For years, I have built this company on results. But results mean nothing without integrity. Lies have spread in these halls. They are not only untrue, but they are harmful to those who dedicate themselves honestly. The name of Lily Evans has been used carelessly. I will say this clearly. She acted with loyalty and skill. Any success we had with our partners came from teamwork, not from favoritism. The rumors end here. The room was silent. Employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. No one dared to respond, yet everyone knew his words carried weight. Later that evening, Thomas sat in his office looking out at the skyline. The city lights stretched endlessly, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of Lily, of her courage, and of how quickly truth could be buried under jealousy. For the first time, he realized that protecting her was not just about fairness. It was about something deeper, something he had denied himself for years. In her small apartment, Lily began teaching music lessons to children from the neighborhood. The laughter of young voices filled the space, reminding her that joy could exist even in difficult times. Still, she wondered if her story at the company had truly ended, or if the storm was only one chapter in something larger. The storm of rumors had tested them both, but storms, no matter how fierce, always pass. What remained was the question of what would rise once the clouds cleared. The storm of rumors had left its mark, but like all storms, it eventually passed. Weeks later, the office returned to its steady rhythm. Papers moved across desks, phones rang with new deals, and meetings filled the calendar once again. Yet one thing was missing. The quiet presence of Lily Evans was no longer there, and her absence left a silence even the busiest schedules could not cover. Thomas Walden, the CEO who had lived for 2 decades without a smile, carried on with his duties. But behind his sharp focus and calm voice, there was a weight that did not lift. Each evening, when he stood by the wide windows of his office and looked down at the city lights, he thought of her. He remembered her steady courage in the elevator, her quick honesty in meetings, and the day she had walked away with her badge resting on his desk. Meanwhile, Lily had begun building a new chapter. In a small community center not far from her apartment, she started teaching children. What began with one student soon grew into a small group. The children came with laughter, energy, and the raw, untamed joy that only youth can bring. Lily guided them patiently, showing them how to find rhythm, how to stay brave in front of others, and how to believe in themselves even when the world doubted them. Word of her efforts spread through the neighborhood. Parents spoke of her kindness, children spoke of her encouragement, and soon the center filled with life every evening. The work gave her peace. Yet even as she found joy in the laughter of children, she wondered about Thomas. She wondered if he had ever truly smiled again. One afternoon, Thomas appeared quietly at the community center. He had followed the sound of young voices, curious to see for himself. The room was alive with movement. Children tapped out rhythms on tables. Others clapped along, and Lily stood at the front, guiding them with patience and warmth. She turned, startled, when she noticed him at the doorway. The children froze, sensing the presence of someone important. Thomas stepped inside slowly, his usual composure in place, but his eyes softer than before. "You built something here," he said, his voice steady. "Something real." Lily nodded, unsure of how to respond. "I only gave them space. They did the rest." He walked closer, watching the children who were now whispering among themselves. "The company, it has always been about numbers and growth. But watching this, I see what we often forge. People need something more than results. They need connection." The children, sensing no danger, began again. Laughter rose, claps echoed, and the room returned to its rhythm. Thomas stood in silence, listening. For the second time in his life, the corners of his mouth curved upward, not forced, not hidden, but a true smile. It was small, but it was real. Later that week, Thomas invited Lily back to the office, not as an assistant, but as someone he wanted by his side in shaping the future of the company. He explained his vision to her. "We cannot lead only with figures. We must lead with humanity. I need people who can remind me of that. You are one of them." Hesitant at first, Lily agreed. She knew returning would not erase the past, but she also knew change had begun and it was worth continuing. Together, they worked to build a culture that valued not only success, but also kindness and connection. Months later, the company celebrated its anniversary with a gathering. Employees, partners, and families filled the hall. Speeches were given, awards were handed out, and for the first time in memory, Thomas stood before the crowd with a genuine smile. It was not the rigid mask of a CEO, but the open face of a man who had finally rediscovered something he had lost. At the end of the evening, he spoke words that would stay with everyone in the room. "For 20 years, I believed success required silence and distance. I was wrong. True success comes from people, from courage, and from the small sparks of life we share. Sometimes it takes one person to remind us of that truth. For me, that person was Lily." Applause filled the hall. Lily stood at the side, humbled but proud. In that moment, she realized the journey had been worth every hardship. The man who had not smiled in 20 years now carried a new expression, and it was not temporary. It was the beginning of a different life, one where leadership meant connection and kindness was never mistaken for weakness. The song that had once broken his silence remained with him, not as a melody, but as a memory of courage and change. It was, and always would be, the song that stays. And so, the CEO who once lived without a smile found hope in the courage of one honest voice. It was more than change. It was a reminder that even the coldest walls can break. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below.